I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: is art subjective? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because yet again I have seen someone trying to defend The Last Jedi by making the claim that art is purely subjective and therefore you can't claim that The Last Jedi is bad filmmaking because that's an objective judgment and you can't judge art by objective standards. It's purely subjective. But is this true? Well, I would argue it's complete nonsense. Let me explain why I think it's nonsense. And what's happening here is people are confusing two different things when they claim that art is totally subjective, and therefore, in this case, the art of filmmaking is totally subjective, and you can't judge or claim that The Last Jedi is a bad film because that would be making an objective claim about it. You see, when an artist creates something, in this case a filmmaker like Rian Johnson creates a piece of art, in this case a film, they have created a real object that exists in the real world. And as such, we can take that object and we can examine that object and we can ask questions about it. We can look at the object and we can say, is it what it is claimed to be? Is it a good example of what it is claimed to be? We can examine its merits, we can examine the craftsmanship, and we can make claims about the merits of this or about the craftsmanship of this particular film. We can actually look at it and examine it, and we can see that in this case, the type of filmmaking that's involved in The Last Jedi, we can ask questions like, is the storytelling craft good? Is the character development craft good? Is the cinematic visuals good? Were the technical aspects of it, the lighting and the cinematography, were they good? Was the sound good? We can look at all of these aspects because they are craft that have gone into making up this artistic object, and we can make judgments about them, and we can actually make objective judgments about them, because a film is an actual object that exists in the real world. Now, what people are confusing when they claim that art is purely subjective is they are confusing the artistic endeavour itself, the object that's been created, with the feelings of the subject about that particular object. So an audience member or a moviegoer who watches The Last Jedi is going to have certain preferences, they're going to have certain attractions that they look for, there are things they're attracted to in a film, and these things are rightly subjective. They're proper to the subject. Each individual subject who goes and sees a film or a particular piece of art has feelings about it. They have preferences, they have likes and dislikes, and they apply those to, in this case, a film, and they say, well, I liked it or I disliked it. Now, that is a thing of subjective preference, but that doesn't mean that the object itself is subjectively good or bad just because someone claims that they don't like it or they thought it was bad or they thought it was good. Someone saying they thought that The Last Jedi was good doesn't make The Last Jedi a good film. What it means is that person, what they're actually saying is, I have a preference for this film. I'm attracted to something or some things in this particular artistic object, and therefore I think it's good because I find it attractive to me subjectively, to me personally. But a person can be attracted to objectively bad things. And so therefore, we can still look at The Last Jedi and we can show how it's an objectively bad example of filmmaking and still find people who are subjectively attracted to it and who are willing to make the claim that they think it's a good film. So someone might look at it and say, well, I love the visuals in this film. And interestingly enough, the visuals of this film is one area where objectively we can say this is some good craftsmanship here that's gone into this film. The visuals are pretty amazing in The Last Jedi. And so someone looks at that aspect of the film, they have a preference for great visuals, they're attracted to the great visuals, they don't care about the other stuff, they ignore the other flaws in the film and they say this is a good film because they're just so attracted by and they have such a preference for good visuals. That's all they're looking for, and they ignore the stuff that we can say objectively is flawed about this particular film. Other people might look at The Last Jedi and what they might say is, I love the ideological messaging, I'm really committed to this idea of female empowerment, and so I like the fact that you have strong female characters who who are put in leading roles in this film. And I don't care about the fact that they are poorly written or the story around them is not well written. I don't care about the characterization flaws. I don't care about the narrative issues and the plot holes and other things. I just like the fact that this is promoting a particular ideological message that I find really appealing. And so I think this is a good film. They wouldn't be right in their claim that this is a good film. They'd be right in their claim that they're attracted to this film. They'd be right in their claim that they like the ideological messaging and that it's got that ideological messaging. But they would be wrong to assume from that this is a good film. It's not. It's got flaws. We can actually, especially this type of filmmaking, it's pretty straightforward when you talk about a film like The Last Jedi. This is not art house or indie filmmaking. It's not abstract filmmaking. It's not surrealist. It's straightforward fantasy storytelling filmmaking. There's supposed to be characters that are well developed. They're supposed to have motivations that make sense, that they're supposed to go on a journey of some kind. And we can point to all of these key areas in the film and we can see flaws here. We can actually point out objective flaws in the craftsmanship of this film. Therefore, this isn't a good film, and that's an objective statement. That's not a purely subjective thing. Now, I might still be attracted to this film despite the flaws. It doesn't make it a good film. Lots of people are attracted to the movie The Room. The Room is not a good film. The craftsmanship in The Room is terrible, but people are attracted to it. Subjectively, they take enjoyment from it, despite the fact that it has objective flaws. And like I said, this is especially true of The Last Jedi because it's simple, straightforward kind of stuff. This is not some weird, abstract, surrealist sort of art house filmmaking. This wasn't Rian Johnson playing a clarinet for 2 hours and he'd play 30 seconds of clarinet and then stop, and say, subverting expectations. Subverting expectations. That's not what this was. This is pretty straightforward kind of fantasy storytelling. It's a very simple thing that you have to get right, and there's a very simple, I guess, standards or hallmarks by which we can measure the merit or the goodness or the badness of the craftsmanship that's gone into making this particular film. This isn't rocket science at all. So to claim that art is purely subjective and therefore you can't make a judgment that's objective and claim that the Last Jedi is a bad film or it's an example of bad filmmaking is simply not true. Like I said, it's a big confusion that a lot of people have today. And it's a way of trying to insert effectively a relativistic defense in between a film, a bad film, and what you might feel about that bad film. Like I said, it's very possible to be attracted to films that have some very glaring flaws in their craftsmanship. I have films that I like, I have preferences for because I connect with them emotionally and I like what the directors and the filmmakers were trying to do, but I can also look at those films and say, yeah, they are flawed. There are storytelling flaws or there's things about the craftsmanship that's not good, but I really appreciate what this film was trying to do and there's something in it, I think there's enough in it for me personally to find merit in. Okay, that is a subjective judgment, but the film itself still remains flawed. So yeah, it is possible, and no, it's not an excuse for The Last Jedi to simply say, well, art is subjective, and therefore you can never make an objective judgment about the merits or otherwise of The Last Jedi. You can, because the artistic endeavour, in this case a film, is a real object, it exists in the real world, therefore you can examine it, and you can measure it by the standards of what we know to be good craftsmanship when it comes to the exercise of filmmaking, and we can show in this case that the craftsmanship is lacking in major areas, and the most important area is the storytelling and around characters, and there are big flaws there. There are big glaring flaws. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon or PayPal. There is a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.